Do you think your family has the strength and the cohesion to win a reality TV competition? What if the prize at the end was a vacation home in Fiji? Do you think you could do it? Do you think your family could do it? Complete some challenges, live together without any TV, phone, internet, anything, on the island for 22 days? Do you think you could do it if you had to live and compete with 4 other families in the vacation home the whole time? You're listening to the Recap Episode, a podcast where I use social science to research, recap, and realize new things about reality television, covering shows that are all-time favorites and exposing you to shows that you've never heard of. My name is Walker, and the focus of this week's episode is a 2002 show from UPN called Under One Roof, a short-lived competition show in which 5 families come to live together under one roof at a Fijian vacation home to compete in challenges and be the last one standing to win the deed to said home. Now, I love getting to cover a show that I've never heard of, but I can almost guarantee that most people have also never heard of this show. It's just so fun to be able to watch a show that I have no idea what it's about going into it. I may have done like a little bit of research to plan out the episode, but, I stay away from most spoilers as best as I can until I actually watch the show if I know nothing about it. And this one was really interesting, so I'm excited to get into it. Now, I will say, Under One Roof, if you search it up, this is not to be confused with Under One Roof, an American drama television series that aired on CBS in 1995, starring James Earl Jones, Joe Morton, and Vanessa Bell Calloway. Should also not be confused with Under One Roof, a 2008-2009 comedy with Flavor Flav, in which Flav plays an ex-con who moves in with his wealthy conservative brother, or confused with Under One Roof, a 2002 rom-com about a gay Chinese man in San Francisco struggling to hide his budding homosexual relationship with a new tenant from his traditional Chinese grandmother. But also be on the lookout for Under One Roof, a dramatic short film from 2017 about a mother mourning the death of her husband and estrangement from her son, and also Under One Roof, an enemies to lovers romance novel about an environmental scientist falling for her new big oil lawyer housemate. If you just type in Under One Roof, all 5 of those things show up in the search results before this show does. So if you're looking to learn more about the show, type in like 2002 or UPN or reality show. That'll get you where you need to be. There is a Wikipedia page that can help you out. I will say, you can watch all 7 episodes of this show on YouTube. The production company that made this show, Endemol, who are really, they're the reality TV big brains. They're a Dutch media company. The Dutch are really good at reality TV. Endemol is specifically responsible for Big Brother, The Voice, I Love Money, Star Academy, and Extreme Makeover Home Edition, just to name some of their, most well-known projects and things they've produced. They have a YouTube channel where they have uploaded a bunch of old episodes of a bunch of old shows that they made. Under One Roof is on there. Another one that I'd like to cover soon called The Salon, which is just like a show documenting a cool beauty salon, is on there. So you can watch all 7 episodes on that YouTube channel, which is how I watched it. So the structure and format of the show is a little strange. It doesn't follow what you may typically be used to for a reality competition show. Instead of one contestant, in this case the families, going home each episode, there's one that goes home every couple of episodes after a few or a handful of challenges. So there's 2 types of challenges the families compete in regularly on this show. There's what they call the family face-off, which is the families are still competing against each other in these challenges, but these don't directly lead to placement and determining if a family will be eliminated or if they get to stay. The family face-off determine the winner of that gets to choose between an item that will give them an advantage in the other type of challenge, or a prize they can have, regardless of if they or when they leave or if they win the competition. The other type of challenge is what they call a property quest, again having to do with winning this vacation home in Fiji. And in these, it's again the families are competing, and in this one they earn ribbons based on their placement. So usually the family who is first gets 4 or 3 ribbons. The family who is second gets 3 or 2, and it goes down by 1 per each placement. The last family always gets 0. The family who places last in the property quest has the opportunity to do an isolation challenge. This is the 3rd type, but it only comes after the property quests, and not all of them. They could do an isolation challenge where they go camping for the night. They don't get to stay at the vacation home with the other families that night. They get 1 ribbon for staying the night, and then they can get a second one for solving some kind of riddle, brain teaser puzzle. After every 2 property quests, which again, you can earn ribbons in both, the family with the lowest number of ribbons is then eliminated. And then after that, all of the ribbon counts reset. So everyone's put back on even playing after the 2 property quests. You do another family face-off, you do a property quest. It's set up so that every episode has at least 1 family face-off and 1 property quest. But it does feel a little different and strange if you're used to watching reality competition series, because a family goes home after episode 2 and then after episode 4, and then the final family, you would think they go home after episode 6, but they actually delay it, and I'll get to that later. I was kind of annoyed. I thought it was an interesting decision from the editing and production side. The last family to go home before the final challenge that pits the final 2 families against each other was actually eliminated in the final episode. So this show has a bit of a strange structure, but I do think it serves it well. Before I get into the recap of the 7 episodes, I do just want to urge listeners again to go watch the show. You can watch it for free on YouTube. All 7 episodes are there. As a human being who has values and morals, there's one particular character that you'll probably hate, but as a reality TV fan, that same character kind of makes the show. If he wasn't here on the show, I think it would be a lot more boring and not as engaging as it actually ended up being. So, episode 1, we open on the island of Koro in Fiji. Then we're greeted by our host Rob Nelson. He shows us the vacation home on the island, and he informs us that 5 families are getting ready to face off in a series of adventure competitions, as he calls it, over 21 days to win the deed to the home. The rules laid out, they all have to share the house. There are 5 families, but there are only 4 bedrooms. One family will win this slice of paradise, but first they'll have to learn how to live together under one roof. Here cuts into our intro sequence, which they play every episode, and it's just scenes of the island and the home, but also scenes from the show of the families doing the challenges and interacting. It was fun to watch it the first time because you got some brief previews of oh, what are they doing? Why are they fighting? It did get a little old when I was in episode 6 or 7. I was okay, we can skip this. Episode 1, you're told the families were flown into Nadi, which is on the main island of Fiji, Suva. And then they're taken by boat to the island of Koro, which is a much smaller one, to the east, where the rest of the show mostly takes place and where the vacation home is located. The families are blindfolded and taken to separate parts of the island for their very first challenge, which is a race to the house. All families are starting 1 kilometer away. They must race to the house. The first family there gets choice of accommodations. The families also have to carry with them 2 trunks of their luggage, these 2 heavy-duty plastic tote-style trunks, and they also must carry their family flag, which is a large wooden reedy pole with a flag with their name on it. They have to carry all of this across the 1 kilometer, whatever they have to trek through. Most of the families are trekking through tropical forest. One of the families has to go by boat, canoe, for where they dropped them off. While they're doing this, and we're observing their successes and their trials and tribulations, we are getting introduced to all the families. So, from Las Vegas, and this is the order of introduction to them. From Las Vegas, we have the Schofield family, parents Michael and Holly, and teen children Brittany and Matt. From Orlando, Florida, we have the McRae family, parents Larry and Janelle, and kids between 11 and 16, Kirsten, Trent, and Shannon. From Huntington Beach, California, we have the Distel family. For the Distel family, we meet Mother Lynn and Father Mike, and their 2 teenage children, David and Melissa. Lynn tells us, as part of her intro, that she had to bribe both of her kids in order to come on this, and Mike shares that he thinks this will be what he calls forced family fun. The Hatmaker family from Galveston, Texas, single mom Michelle and her 18-year-old son Daniel and 14-year-old son Jonathan. Joining them, just to round them out, is a family friend, Mark, who isn't really like trying to play the stepdad role at all. That's not his like prerogative. He's just a really good friend to Michelle and has been close to her for many a year, so he tagged along to participate and help them out. And the last family, the Pagani family from Henderson, Nevada, with parents George and Robin, and it's Marcella, Giancarlo, and Bianca. Robin shares with us that this family was a little on the rocks. They were going to open up a restaurant business in LA, but that didn't go well, and I believe this caused the parents to split for a while, but they've made a new start, and to them nothing is more important than family. So the families are racing to be the first one to the home, because again, first one there gets first choice of the accommodations. There are 5 families, but there are only 4 bedrooms. Again, some of them do pretty well on this trek, some of them do really horribly. Mark, for some reason, wore leather pants to Fiji. The first thing he does is take them off. I don't blame him. You're in the tropics, my guy. For the Hatmakers, Mark actually has to rest quite a bit during the trek through. And while the kids are upset and they're annoyed that they're being slowed down, Michelle is strong and is there kind of keeping them. It's like, nope, we're not going to hurt ourselves getting there. We'll be fine. The first family to make it to the house is the Distal family. They get there in 1 hour and 9 minutes. The family attempts to take 2 of the rooms out of the 4. Here, one of the kids, tells in a confessional that they don't want to do that because that makes the other families hate them. The Schofield family arrives second after 1 hour and 33 minutes, and they do the same. They also take 2 rooms, which means 2 families are at the house, and of the 4 rooms, they're all claimed, and there's still 3 families to arrive. The Schofield and Distal families, they do discuss if they should make their rooms available to their families or not. Mostly the parents here, the kids are kind of like, please stop embarrassing us. It's the nice thing about all mostly teen children on this show is they're all very embarrassed by their parents all the time. The McRae family arrives third. This upsets one of the children of the family, Kirsten, the youngest, because they're already kind of behind in her eyes. This is when we start getting some of the tension. Matt from the Schofield family places one of the family banners that was supposed to be used to claim the bedrooms on the fridge, which then spurred Larry, the father of the McRae family, to put up a physical wall and use his flags to then claim the bathroom and the laundry room and the stove. I note here, the kids don't really want to be hated by the other families. Their parents are embarrassing them, but all the parents are in the game. They're ready to throw down. They don't care what the other people think of them. It makes for an interesting dynamic throughout the show, and seeing how that will evolve. We get Mike from the Schofields and Larry here arguing about what it means to stake a claim in the thing. What's allowed. According to Mike, the accommodations were what you were allowed to take. But then with Matt's little joke about taking the fridge, Larry was like, well, they didn't say you couldn't do anything else, so we're taking all these other things. The Hatmakers finally arrive fourth after stopping multiple times, which is a surprise because, again, they had to stop multiple times, and, they kind of conceded. It's it doesn't matter if we get there last. And it immediately makes you go what the hell happened to the Pagani family in that jungle that made them arrive last? I think they just got lost. Once all the families are finally at the house and they're all realizing it's oh, how is this going to work out? Because there's 22 people here. And while it's a nice, large-ish vacation home, again, there's only 4 bedrooms. So there's a lot of, sleeping in the living room, sleeping on couches, making makeshift tents on the floor. After they're all settled in, Rob Nelson approaches the families. I'm sure this is probably the first time they've met him. He congratulates their arrival, and then he provides them all those rules and overall structure for the show that I gave you earlier. He also points out here, the families, they do get a one-time provision for food. The camera pans over and we see a bunch of wooden crates that are filled with food and supplies. Rob tells them that when they run out, they'll need to barter for more food with the locals. We never see this. I was really excited to see this, and it just if it happened, it was never shown. I don't know if they maybe scrapped the idea and got more food for the families later, because the food does become a problem. But I kind of wish they showed that if it happened. The show uses the local Fijian populations in a very interesting way that I'll get into later. Rob also tells them there's no rules for running the house, so families must figure everything out on their own in that regard. From here on out, I'm gonna be honest, the challenges weren't exactly the most interesting thing going on in this show. Every now and then, maybe a family or a particular individual's participation and performance in a challenge is interesting, and I'll bring that up, or it shows a level of strategy. But other than that, the challenges are kind of boring to watch. And some of them, they have to fast forward through them. There's one, and I'll get to it, but they're doing the challenge for over 2 hours before anyone actually succeeds. So I'm just going to kind of quickly speed through the challenges for each episode and then focus more on all of the dynamics of the families and the individuals living together and interacting together, because it's much more interesting. Unfortunately, the only thing that's really the main focus of the rest of the first episode is their first property quest. Everything else is kind of just the families getting settled in. You see some very quick cuts of family members interacting with each other, talking. There is some brief mention of a concern and a discussion between parents of various families about the number of kids that are present and how a lot of them are teens, and that making it difficult to ration the food for long enough. But it doesn't really go anywhere in this episode. So the property quest that the families do on day 2, it's a raft building competition. The families get a bunch of bamboo and rope. They need to construct a raft, take it out into the water, retrieve 2 crab traps, and then drag everything back to shore into a certain finish line area. A little bit of strategy comes into play here. Mike, the father of the Schofield family, he notices that his family is falling behind, and so he elicits the help of one of the other families. He says hey, we'll help you drag your raft, and we'll put you in third if you help us drag ours and put us in fourth, that way, or at least not last. The kind of most important placements for the property quests are first and last, at least in the first one of each cycle. In the second one, things get a little dicier, just because the isolation challenge can grant more ribbons, and then of course whoever gets the least after the second one is eliminated. In this very first property quest, the Hatmaker family is first. They earn the most ribbons, and the Pagani family is last, earning 0. They then get the option to do the isolation challenge, which they agree to do, which for them takes place inside an old church that was built in the early 20th century, was knocked down by a cyclone a couple years prior to filming. They got 1 ribbon for sleeping and spending the night inside the church, and they get a riddle brain teaser to solve, which, minor spoiler alert for the start of episode 2, they don't solve it, so they don't get that second ribbon. Episode 2 begins the pattern of each episode having a family face-off followed with a property quest. The family face-off for this episode is just a field goal kick competition. They do this because the locals on the island are having a rugby tournament. So during, quote, halftime, the competitors entertain the locals by doing a field goal kick competition. The Hatmakers win this, beginning their win streak for challenges. Just a reminder, the family face-offs, the winner gets the choice between an advantage item that should help them in the next property quest, or a prize that will await them when they return to the States. If they choose the prize, the advantage item instead goes to the family who got second place. The Hatmakers choose the advantage item, which is a t-shirt. The property quest that the t-shirt will then help them with is all about placing local spiders onto your family members. Some of these just have very bizarre concepts. Honestly, this is probably the most bizarre one, except for maybe the chicken one later. Spoilers. So for this property quest, each family has to designate 2 spider placers and 2 spider holders. Most of the families choose the kids to be the placers and the parents to be the holders. The only families that deviated from this were the Schofields, who chose Mother Holly and daughter Brittany to be the holders because they ratted out their hair so the spiders could just sort of latch onto it. And the Pagani family, who struggled because Bianca, their youngest, is really afraid of spiders. And I don't quite understand why Bianca had to participate in this. I believe it's because she got to sit out in the first property quest, the raft challenge. The Pagani family and the McRae family both have 5 members, so they're often, one of their kids will sit out so that they have 4 competing members, same as the other families. Bianca sat out during the raft challenge, so I think maybe the production was like, she has to participate in the next one, because Marcella is not doing anything for this one. Bianca is absolutely terrified of the spiders, so it just comes down to Giancarlo placing the spiders onto his mother, while Bianca clings onto her dad like a spider monkey. Interestingly enough, though, despite having only 1 person placing spiders, the Pagani family does win this property quest. The Distal family ends up only placing 13 spiders, and so they ended up with 0 new ribbons. The Pagani family had earned 1 from isolation, so they were at 1 but previous, and then they earned 4 more for winning this property quest, and so Distal family was the first ones to be sent home at the end of this episode. Now, the actual exciting part of episode 2 is all of the conflict, the drama, and the conflama that the family started to engage in, primarily driven by one man. So back at the top of the episode, we get some footage of the families interacting at the house, and we get some confessionals from some of the different family members. Particularly of interest here is Michael Schofield, the father of the Schofield family. He tells us in his confessional that he's ready to start playing strategically and messing with the members of the other families. The other main sort of plot line for people in this episode comes down to Melissa, the elder teenage daughter of the Distal family. She is not having a good time. If you'll recall, Lynn Distal kind of bribed her kids to come on this adventure with her and her husband. Melissa's just not having a good time out here in the middle of Fiji, in the middle of the Pacific. She just wants to go home, be with her friends. Allegedly, this was filmed in October 2001. So I'm assuming all these kids are missing school or doing something to make it up. But that's Melissa's story for this episode, is she doesn't want to be here, and her parents struggle to figure out how to help her adapt, and she's specifically struggling because to her it seems like the other kids that are here don't really like interacting with her, and her parents tell us that she's very smart, but this makes it hard to comfort her and to give her advice, because she kind of questions it and sees through some of the kind of layers and whatnot. But the more interesting thing, perhaps, is Michael. He decides to play a prank on the McRae family. And this doesn't necessarily come out of nowhere. There's a bit of a discussion early on in this episode about food waste, and particularly a lot of the other families start pointing out that they think or they're observing that it's the McRae family that is consuming the most food. They're trying to portion things out. Whenever they cook, they have leftovers. They're trying to make sure the leftovers have to be eaten strategically. They can't just consume them whatever you want. And yet the McRae family is doing that, or they're the ones doing it the most, is what we're told by the other families. And so they're already kind of in a position of attention from the other families. And so Michael says, let's see what we can do to mess with them. So in the middle of the night, he decides to pull a prank, and he gets his kids, and I think a couple of the other kids. I think Daniel Hatmaker joins him in on this, and so does Jonathan, much to Michelle's dismay. And Michael takes a bunch of the crates where they've been storing their trash and lines them up along with some of the furniture, so some chairs, in front of the door to the room that the McRae family is living in for this competition right now. At least Janelle and Larry are in there. The kids might not have been. They may be out under a fake little tent. The commotion of all of this being stacked and everything awakes Janelle, and she begins to start digging through all of the stuff that's placed. Again, crates of trash, because she believes that maybe this is a clue to the next property quest, Larry comes out and begins to help her with the same thing, so they're digging through the trash thinking it's a real thing. There's a lot of cuts to footage of Michael looking very incredulous, but also playing dumb, And Larry and Janelle start asking her any other families. They're like, well, who did this? If it wasn't the production team setting up a thing for a challenge, who did this? And Michael's acting innocent. They can't figure out who did it. Turns into a whole thing. I think I mentioned this already, but the McRae family is the only black family there. And so what this becomes is Larry and Janelle believing that one of the other families did this with racial motivations or racist motivations. And furthermore, we then have to see Larry and Janelle explain to their kids, and who knows if this is the first time they've had this conversation with their kids, but now it's on camera. We have to see them explain to their kids that hey, sometimes sick, racist white people do stuff like this to try to mess with us, to try to, get a rise out of us and aggravate us and make us aggressive. But we can't play into that. So not only does it upset Larry and Janelle, but with all of this understanding and the implications and everything, it begins to upset Trent and Shannon, for sure, the elder of the kids. I'm sure it also affects Kirsten, but it's hard to tell if it affects her to the same amount, because Trent and Shannon are the ones that are usually in confessional telling us about it for the rest of the show, or at least the next couple of episodes. And so over the next day, Janelle wants to talk to everyone about the incident, this, quote, prank, figure out who did it, and get an apology. And it really just goes nowhere. It kind of comes down to a little bit of Michael doth protest too much. And that's how they figure out that he did it. And, the episode kind of just ends off on, we've had this prank, and it's kind of outstanding. I was like, well, where do we stand now? The McRae family definitely doesn't like Michael, and he's really trying to get out of it, because he's trying to be like, it's not a race thing, it's not a race thing, I would have pranked anyone. But they're like, well, why did you prank us? And it spirals a bit, and this is the beginning of Michael the asshole. I really am, I struggled to do it justice trying to relay it through here. Definitely go watch the first 2 episodes, and then choose if you want to watch the rest, because Michael's a great reality TV, quote, villain, but he does make you want to punch your screen while you watch him. I will say, just to wrap up episode 2 and get back to Melissa, she does have a change of attitude, and she attempts to have a good time and get along with the other kids that are here, and then the Distel family goes home. So, sorry, Melissa. You had a bad time. You tried to have a good time, and then we sent you home. So that's the first 2 episodes. If you were somehow watching this live on UPN in March of 2002, that's all you would have seen. This show was canceled after 2 episodes due to just poor ratings. I couldn't quite figure out if it was overall ratings or if it just dipped after the first episode. People weren't interested, or if the prank that Michael pulled causing all this conflict in this episode was a turnoff and people not want to watch and tune into the rest. But they canceled it. However, Endemol, of course, uploaded all the episodes to their YouTube channel, which is where I watch them all, and you can watch them all. So we will carry on to episode 3. Episode 3, in terms of the interpersonal conflicts here, focuses on the aftermath and the fallout of Michael pulling this prank, and the McRae family trying to confront him, and him really backing himself into a corner and making himself just look really bad, and this beginning to come down on his children in particular. And then the other thing that we get to focus on in this episode is these budding relationships between the kids that are on the island. They're all preteen or teenagers, and they're all what else are they going to do to get away from their families that they are stuck here with, and they have no entertainment? They're going to go hang out with the other kids. and there's a lot of like pairs of the same age, so they're hanging out, flirting, all that good stuff. Interestingly, a lot of the families are kind of like, we're chill with this. It's cute. I guess it helps that you're all in the same house, so it's not like they can easily get away and do anything you don't want them doing. And one particular member here, Daniel, the elder son of the Hatmaker family, he gives us some commentary here about how he thinks his younger brother Jonathan, who's 14, who's been chatting with Brittany of the Schofield family, he thinks he's, quote, gonna do some damage and make him proud. This will play out later. Daniel also shares some interesting insight here that he calls the McRae family dysfunctional. He really, after Michael's prank, his observation of that family is that they can't, quote, take a joke, and that because of that, Daniel's like, well, now we know that we can, mess with them really easily, and if we keep doing it, we can really throw them off their game. Michael, in a confessional, corroborates this by saying that he is, quote, not done with the McRaes yet, and after them, he'll move on to the Hatmakers. The other big thing here, this episode is when they start doing, campfire council with Rob, the host. Not like Survivor Council where they're going to, vote someone off. It's just, time, and Rob, discusses with them the events and the conflicts that have been going on. Particularly in this one, he kind of confronts Michael about what he did and what's going on. Janelle here, she claims that Michael's being real nice in front of everyone, but then when everyone is gone, he's scheming, which we get to see in confessionals and in camera footage multiple times. Michael keeps saying he doesn't have an agenda, but again, clearly earlier in the episode, he's like, I'm going to mess with the McRaes more, and then I'm going to mess with the Hatmakers. Very much doing this kind of fake person persona. Be nice to you out front, but then hate you behind your back. It's hard to tell if he's trying to save his general image here, if he's become aware of he's on a TV show and this will be broadcast to people, and so his behavior will be observed by others. I kind of get the sense that he never realizes that throughout the entire show. Honestly, I get the sense that none of them realize that throughout the show. This is 2002, so we haven't quite hit the reality TV explosion yet, where people who end up on these shows actually understand what it means to be on these shows. And so everyone here really is kind of acting either in the way they normally do or in a heightened version of that state, or a heightened version of that characterization. So it's hard to tell if he's trying to cover his own ass when he defends himself, or if he just is being antagonistic and this is just how he is. This is funny because we after this little council, Robin of the Pagani family, she's talking to her 3 kids and she's like, let's have a positive attitude, let's remain strong, let's be a cohesive family, we're going to get through this together and we're going to do great. And then it immediately cuts to Michael and Holly, parents of the Schofields family, still trying to hash things out with Larry and Janelle from the McRae family, and it is just not going well. Michael keeps claiming he has nothing to do with the prank, and specifically the garbage. Shady editing here. The editors cut immediately to the clip of him moving the crates of garbage in front of the door. And then he also tells us in confessional, he's like, you know what, the only reason I'm doing this at this point is just for fun. Love it. The reality TV villain extraordinaire. And he may not even realize it. I think this is just the way he is. Later that night, some of the kids are hanging out, specifically Brittany and Jonathan, hanging out at the end of this dock pier. And Michael is doing another prank. He's stolen the McRae family's family flag emblem thing, and he's climbing up into a tree to plant it up there just because he can. And Brittany and Jonathan spot him clambering up there, and because he spots them spotting him, he runs down. Jonathan's gone at this point, but he grabs Brittany, his daughter, and he's like, hey, you can make sure that he's not going to go say anything to his parents, right, about what he saw. And she's like, yeah, I think we're fine. Although interestingly, this is cut with some footage of Daniel talking to Jonathan, where he officially plants the idea in Jonathan's mind to backstab Brittany by specifically taking advantage of her feelings for him. Morning comes, we discover the flag in the tree. The McRae family is like, you know what, we're just gonna ignore it, we're just gonna move on. And this kind of pisses Michael off, you can tell, to the point where he becomes annoying. He's trying to get them to say something about it. And he's like, what do you think of your flag in the tree? What do you think of that? Are you going to go get it? And Larry's just like, we don't need it right now. I've got other things I'm worried about. I'm going to go do this thing over here. And Michael's just like, but your flag. And Larry's like, I don't care. And it's not, Michael wants to get a rise out of them, and it's not working. And like I said, he just becomes annoying. Holly, interestingly here, she kind of like sat back and let Michael lead the charge on this, but she does give a confessional here where she does tell us, like, you know what, it's kind of annoying. I wish they would do something back to our family and, like, poke the bear back. But what this turns into is the Schofield family being just ignored by everyone else in the house. This carries on for quite a while, and this comes down on the kids, particularly Brittany and Matt. They start getting annoyed and upset that the other families are ignoring them, including the kids. Because, again, what else are they going to do on this island when they're stuck there with their family and, now 3 other families? Michelle of the Hatmakers kind of ends things here for this episode in terms of the drama and everything by saying, she's observed all this happening. She hasn't really been involved. She has been good to Larry and Janelle and kind of reached out to them, like, privately to comfort them and offer sort of like a pseudo-apology and support. And she shares with us that, like, her opinion of Michael, she really doesn't like now, is unfortunately impacting her opinion of his kids. And then she goes to have a talk with Jonathan about this relationship with Brittany. For the challenges for episode 3, the family face-off it took them over 2 hours, just putting that at the top here. They have to be out on the water on a little, like, raft. They have to, like, climb onto the raft, like the families of 4. They have some sit out, I believe. Climb onto the raft, stand on top of a fabric, like all of them have to be on the fabric, and then they have to find a way to flip the whole fabric over without any of the family members stepping off of it onto the raft or touching the water. If they do that, they have to all get back in the water and start over. This takes them over 2 hours. But the Hatmakers win this. The Pagani family got second place. The Hatmaker family chooses the advantage item, which is a rake. The gift, in case you're wondering, was going to be 4 tickets to the 2002 World Series. The rake comes in handy for the Property Quest challenge, which was very silly. They were supposed to firewalk, walk across some, like, burned down embers and coals and whatnot. They had, like, a class with an expert firewalker ahead of time, and I have to agree with Michael here. I thought they were going to learn how to firewalk. No, she just kind of, like, did a little life lesson with them about, like, facing your fears and had them break, like, an arrow that they wrote their fears on symbolically, like, with their sternum. And then they all firewalked. Bianca almost didn't do it, but she finally pushes through. But because they all did it, they all tied. So then they had to do a tiebreaker, which was this silly little marbles game that literally everyone sucked at. Rob tried to even show them how to, like, do it, and he just, like, missed horribly. He's like, here's how you do it. Not like that. Never mind. Robin of the Pagani family finally figures out the trick. You have to, like, because you have to, like, shoot the marble a specific way by, like, catapulting it with your middle finger. She's like, oh, you have to, like, flick your wrist at the same time. At the end of this, the McRae family has 3 ribbons. The Schofield family has 2. Pagani's have 1. And the Hatmakers have 0. They choose to do an isolation challenge so they can earn some more ribbons. That's the end of episode 3. And if you were somehow watching this live in July of 2002, that's all you would have seen. They canceled the show initially in March, April of 2002 after 2 episodes, and then they brought it back in the summer as a replacement for some other show. Re-aired the first 2 episodes, aired the third, and then canceled it again, making it a show that was canceled twice in the same year. And that's all that people got initially, until eventually the rest of the episodes were released online years later, again on Endemol's YouTube channel. People pushed for the longest time to figure out, like, well, what happened? Did a family eventually win? Did they get the house? Yes. A family did win. They did eventually get the house. And to answer your question of, well, who? I'll cover the remaining 4 episodes for you. But I do encourage you to go watch. Episode 4 begins with Michael Schofield telling us, I think there's some animosity between the families. It can be hard to tell, when things were, like, filmed and then put in order. To the extent where I would almost believe that may be something that happened earlier, but who knows. Everyone is turning on the Schofield family, continuing the kind of silent treatment that they started giving them in the previous episode. Brittany Schofield tells us in a confessional that she thinks her dad is being really obnoxious. She really doesn't like that she's being dragged into that by association. But in contrast, we immediately cut that with Michael and Matt, his son, talking about how they can figure out more ways to mess with the other families. The Hatmaker family comes back from their isolation challenge, with which, I'll just state here, they did succeed. They spent the night and they solved their little riddle. It was like little puzzle pieces together into a 3D shape, which is like kind of unfair compared to the Pagani family, the previous isolation, because like they had to do like a weird actual like brain teaser riddle, and this one you could kind of brute force it until you figured it out, especially since you had like all night. When the Hatmakers come back, all the other families, the McRaes, the McRaes and the Paganis, greet them warmly. The Schofields do not. And Mark of the Hatmaker group tells us in a confessional that he's now ready to start playing shady back to the Schofield family. And Daniel tells us as well that he's going to do the same. One of the major pieces of like conflict in this episode is Brittany at some point shared with the rest of the teens that are on the island that Michael Schofield is bisexual. And of course, this is filmed in 2001, aired in 2002. You can imagine the type of sensibilities that people have around queerness at this time. So this spirals and does not go well for Michael and the Schofield family at all. Particularly, they like to play up here the Hatmaker family like going ham in like homophobia, etc. For the rest of the like show, they're calling Michael a homo. Daniel keeps saying that he would disown his dad if he was gay or even bisexual, as it was put. Michelle tries to like step in and be like, okay, let's not become like a new target for people because we're going to start like taunting people for their sexualities. The family face-off in this episode had the kids like taking charge, and I'll wrap up the challenges in a moment for this episode, but I had to bring that up because at the little campfire discussion thing that's led by Rob, what he asked them about is like the role reversal that they had to do in the family face-off, where instead of the parents leading the charge, the kids had to like lead them to success. And particularly he, wanted to try to like spark some discussion among them about like, well, what did it feel like to not be the one in charge, to have to be taking orders from the children? All the families are kind of like, wow, I thought, the parents are like, I could trust my kids because I'm emotionally stable and can connect with them. And then you get to the Schofield family, and Michael's struggling because he's used to just like being the one in charge all the time and everyone looking to him, which some of the other families picked up on during the challenge was that the Schofield kids kept trying to like look to Michael to be like, well, are we doing this right? Is this what we should be doing? And like during the challenge, like the parents weren't allowed to say anything. So it's an interesting kind of exposure of the family dynamic for the Schofields during that. There's a bit of an evening chat between Michael and Daniel about his sexuality because Daniel's been the one that's like been particularly hounding him the most about it. But at the same time, we get Mark coming over to try to give the Schofield kids some advice, because the Schofield kids really don't like they're being excluded and isolated and ignored because of the things their dad is doing, but they're also still playing into it. And Mark is trying to give them a little bit of a lesson about like, listen, you can't have it both ways. Like, you can't be mean to everyone and be upset that no one wants to be around you. Interesting that, this has to come from the Mark, the guy who isn't a parent as far as I'm aware, and is not even like blood family to the group he's with, and also not these kids' parent. It seems like this gets a little bit through to Brittany. Additionally, we then also see Matt going to talk to Trent of the McRae family. Matt's trying to make amends, and he just, he really wants to be back in everyone's good graces and being able to like talk to everyone else on the island again. So it's like the kids are, trying to like rebuild the relationships with all these people. And then we immediately get this cut with a confessional about how regretful Michael is, about his kids having such a bad time because of him. But I guarantee, you guess what? Is anything going to change? No. It's very weird, like flip-flop back and forth. Ugh. Good TV, though. Interestingly, Brittany also shares with us here that when they first got to the island, both her parents had kind of advised her to not become friends with anyone else on the island in like a strategic way, which is, try telling like a 15-year-old not to become friends with the other teenagers on the island with them. A quick rundown of all the actual, like, challenge progression events from this episode. The Hatmaker family, like I said, they won their isolation, so they got to come back. They earned 2 more ribbons. The family face-off was like this coconut catapult bullseye game, again, where the kids had to be the ones to lead the way for each of their family teams and choose what happens. The parents weren't allowed to make any comments at all. They could just do as told. The winners of the family face-off were, again, the Hatmakers, continuing their win streak. The advantage item is a bullhorn, and the prize was a $2,500 shopping spree, which they chose. Michelle and Mark, since the kids had to win the challenge because they were in charge, they actually let Daniel and Jonathan choose, and they chose the shopping spree, which means the bullhorn get to the second place family, which happened to be the Schofields. For the property quest for this episode, and again, this is the second one in the cycle, so after this one, a family gets eliminated. Whoever has the least amount of ribbons. This one's weird. They call it Labyrinth. One member of each of the families, which happens to be a kid, I don't know if they chose or if that was chosen for them, stands at the center of a circular arena on a platform. Everyone else in their families is blindfolded and placed around the edge of this circular arena. The ones in the middle have to kind of guide the blindfolded ones to a post to grab a shell and then bring that shell to the center. And whoever gets all their family there first is first place, second place, so on and so forth. The Schofield family ends up completing it first, then Hatmakers, then McRae family just barely ekes it out ahead of the Pagani family. With the new standings, this places Schofield at the top with the ribbons at the end, and the Pagani family at the bottom with 2, so the Pagani family is eliminated. I note here, poor Bianca, LMAO, she barely did anything on this show except for cry and complain. So the Pagani family's out of here. And one last thing for this episode that's very interesting. Out of all the little teenage relationships, Marcella from the Paganis was getting close with Matt from the Schofields. Even though they're all being ignored, Marcella was still hanging around and talking with Matt. As she leaves, she gifts to Matt her t-shirt, that her family clan shirt that she wears for the challenges, which is adorable. And we do get to see Matt wearing it in some later episodes. But now Matt's sad because he doesn't have anyone to talk to aside from his family. Now, that was the end of episode 4. And if you were somehow... No, I'm just kidding. It was canceled after the 3rd episode the second time. They never aired anything else. But I got you. You thought. Episode 5 continues the descent of the Schofield family. The first thing we get to see is a burnt scroll delivered to the families from one of the locals, and it's addressed to the Schofield family. It's written in Fijian, however, so Holly has to take it to get it translated by one of the local police force that I guess has been helping them on the island. And he loosely interprets it as a message from Mark, with the Hatmaker group, that says, "We don't like you, and you should leave." Holly comes back and confronts Mark, and he says, "Yeah, I'm not that creative, but good try," to kind of, leave it as an air of mystery. And the McRae family finds this very amusing, and it seems this has actually succeeded in finally getting under the Schofield's skin. Now that everyone is really we don't like you, get out of here. They're kind of oh, our bad behavior has come back and bit us in the face. This eventually leads into Michael demanding a house meeting to talk about this prank, and he keeps saying, listen, I don't care who did it, I just want to talk about it. But it's kind of if you don't care, dude, then why are you bringing it up so much? Mark continues to defend himself and that he didn't do it, and then immediately we get a pseudo-confessional, him talking to Daniel about, he's yeah, I did it. Of course I did it. This is how I'm messing with them. This is how I'm getting back at them. And Daniel here shares that he thinks Jonathan is doing a good job of ignoring Brittany. But then Brittany, clever girl, in her own confessional, shares that she's I know what Jonathan's doing. I know the game they're playing. They're trying to ignore me because they're trying to take advantage of me. She's I'm not going to let him do that. I'm just going to play along and make him think that he has one over on me. So props to Brittany. Smart girl. Very interesting thing happens in the next sort of in-between events. The family's hanging out on the island scene. We go to the next morning, and the Hatmaker family and the McRae families go to church with the locals. I did some snooping in a satellite view on Google Maps to try to figure out, like, I tried to find the house to see if you could still see it on satellite view. I probably could. I haven't checked Google Earth. You could probably, like, go back in time and maybe see it there. But in the current maps on Google, you cannot. On Google Maps, you can't see it. But you can see a lot of the other communities on the islands, and there are some landmark churches that are, like, listed as, like, real locations that you can click on. I couldn't quite figure out which church this was. There is, like, a Jehovah's church on the island for sure, so I don't know if it was this one. But I thought it was very interesting that the show wanted to include, like, showing the Hatmaker and McRae families going to church, and they talk a bit about, like, being Christian and being a good person, and then this is contrasted visually and kind of meaningfully with the Schofield family, who are shown to physically not be with them at church, just hanging out back at the thing, and we get footage of Michael trying to scheme with Matt still, but also them talking about, like, one of them says, the locals asked, like, where's the third family? And Mark was like, well, the ones who are going to hell are the ones who aren't here. So talking, a spiritual comparison even, which is a very interesting thing to do, because, like, the United States is a very deeply, like, Christian cultural state. And so to kind of, like, put that on television, it's almost allowing the show to make, like, a new demarcation of, like, you really didn't like, if this were to air, like, you really didn't like the Schofield family already? Well, now if you're, like, a Christian viewer, now you're really not going to like them, because they don't go to church. And also Michael's bisexual. I just thought it was very interesting, and there's another layer here where it's, like, also showing them interacting with the local Fijian population. So not only does it make the Hatmakers and the McRae family seem sort of on the greater side spiritually, but also in terms of, like, worldliness and just sort of, like, being a general, like, kind and welcoming and curious person. Like, we got footage of them going and doing things with the locals, which is very interesting to think about when you pair that with, like, the concept of a vacation home on a Fijian island. Like, people live there all year round, that's where their entire lives are, but then now we have these other people who have enough, like, capital and a social ability to be able to have an extra home in this location that they only come to for part of the year, even though they're earning it through a reality TV show. Very interesting, like, dynamics. I could dissect this scene for, like, another hour, probably. Maybe that'll be a bonus episode in the future. The next challenge, I'm going to cut back, and I want to talk about the challenges before I go into the rest of the conflict for the episode, because it comes from the property quest, the rest of the conflict. So the family face-off for this episode is, like, a telephone-esque relay race game. They, like, split up into different roles for their families. One person has to look at a collection of items and then memorize them. And then they have to go run across the beach, communicate what items were assigned to them to a different family member, who runs down the dock, communicates that to family members who are waiting in the water. The ones in the water have to swim out, dive down, collect these items, and then bring them back, and relay run them all the way back to, like, a storage container where they drop them off. And if a family gets the wrong item, they have to run it back and put it back in the water, because each family has assigned different items. This one's stressful, and the Schofield family doesn't do well. The Hatmakers win again, continuing their win streak. The advantage item was a first choice of location for the property quest challenge, and the prize was a home theater system with a 30-inch flat screen. They choose the advantage, so no one gets the home theater system. The property quest is at this tiny little sandbar-esque island called Shark Island, which we're told will, like, disappear when the tide comes in. Each family gets, like, a 10 foot by 10 foot wooden frame on the island. The Hatmakers got to choose where they place theirs. And the general gist of this is they have to construct a defensive structure to protect this little bamboo tube. They can use whatever they want on the island. They can use, like, their clothes, and, like, a lot of them use their shoes to, like, make some fortifications. They get 30 minutes to do that, and then once that's done, tide starts coming in, and they can't touch anything. They can't touch the tube. They can still, like, build fortifications and try to, like, reinforce it, but they can't touch the tube or they're disqualified, and they can't go into any other family's square or they're disqualified. The big thing here is the McRae family accidentally ends up disqualifying themselves while trying to protect their little tube because Kirsten, the youngest, accidentally throws some sand that hits the tube, which is like the silliest way to disqualify someone in the competition. It feels very much like a technicality, but we would have been waiting there for a while, I think. And the funny thing is, like, they were out, and they also still hate the Schofields because of Michael's prank from episode 2. So once they got eliminated, they're like, you know what? Screw the Schofields, let's go help out the other family. So they do. Guess who wins? It's the Hatmaker family. They win. But during the competition, this challenge, the Hatmaker children and Mark decide to start messing with the Schofield family. And at one point, what it turns into is a little bit of some physical stuff, and then also, like, Mark just antagonizing Brittany specifically, like, calling her an idiot and calling her, like, what she's doing not effective and stupid, and he, like, threatens to drown her, apparently. A little aggressive. But the Hatmakers win. McRae's end up in the bottom, so they get the opportunity to do a isolation challenge. The reason I wanted to cover this first is then the rest of the conflict of the episode is Michael trying to talk to Michelle and trying to talk to Mark about Mark's sportsmanship during that competition and coming after his daughter. Mark becomes a little bit of an asshole here, deservedly. I'm not going to defend him here. He really tries to, like, back away, mostly just because he doesn't like Michael and he doesn't want to, like, concede anything to him. But, Michael eventually gets him to kind of admit, he's like, okay, yeah, I was mad, I did a bad thing directed at your daughter. His perspective is like, your daughter happened to be the one closest by. Like, if it was Holly, if it was Matt, if it was Mike, any of them would have been the focus of his, like, aggressiveness instead. The really fun thing is, while Michael and Mark are kind of, like, arguing with each other, Michael actually tries to go talk to Michelle about it, and Michelle is like, I don't want to talk to him alone anywhere. So she drags him out into, like, the main area in front of everyone. He's like, I don't want to do this out here. She's like, well, you are. But because of that, Larry gets brought in from the McRae family, and he's having a great time. Particularly, he brings up that it's like, well, when it was my daughter at the face of your prank, you didn't care, but now suddenly it's your daughter, so you care. I have a note here where I'm like, I just think Mark and Michael should brawl. Michael is like a fitness guy, skinny, from California. He kind of looks like Fred from the live-action Scooby-Doo movies. And Mark is like a 6 foot, 300-pound ex-military guy. I think they should brawl. I also finally note here in my notes while watching the show, I can't stand Michael, but good God, does he make entertaining TV, at least in 2025 sensibility. I'm always wanting more real arguments and fights, and this was a good one. Episode 6, we first start with Mark telling us that he's finally reached his breaking point with Michael, and he has to tell him his opinion, and so he marches up and they talk about it. Michelle calls Michael Mr. Macho Glamour Shots here. Love Michelle. Love her mom way of talking when she's mad. Matt and Brittany are still a little annoyed at this point that their parents are really making things harder for them specifically, and Michael keeps expressing regret that he's made things hard for the kids, but that doesn't mean he's going to change his behavior. Of course not. But he should have points for feeling bad about it, right? Something weird that happened in this episode is they're talking about something that happened between Jonathan and Mike Schofield. I'm 95% positive Jonathan, the 14-year-old son in the Hatmaker family, called Michael a slur. And instead of, like, cutting this entire conflict and all of these events, what they did instead was they just sort of cut audio every time someone repeated said slur, which happens way more than you think it would. Every episode in this show has something there. I'm like, go watch it for this, go watch it for this. Episode 6, watch it for this weird editing choice where they left in what I'm pretty sure is people saying a slur over and over again, and just cutting it. We love the early 2000s. I will say, just to cut it in here, because it happens near the start of the episode, the McRae family does their isolation, and they isolated on Shark Island on a raft. They're not allowed to leave the raft the whole night. Of course, they did have, like, a flare they could send off if they really needed to come get picked up. But if they didn't make it through the night, obviously they wouldn't earn a ribbon. But the special things here is if you get picked up partway through, even if you solve the little puzzle, you don't get a ribbon for that. They stay through the night, they solve the puzzle, they get 2 ribbons from that. So even though they got 0 from the previous property quest, they're back at 2 now. One of the other things that's going on in this episode in terms of, like, the family dynamics and what we're learning about the families, aside from the Schofield family kind of having a spiral a death spiral, if you will. Michelle here is talking to us a lot about Jonathan in particular, the younger son of hers, 14 years old, still struggling with the death of her husband and his father a year prior, and how it's, hard to get him as like an angsty teenager to open up about it, and how it makes it hard for her to parent sometimes and to really connect with him. And that, she's saying this, can explain some of the, like, behavior we're seeing with him on the island. At the campfire council thing in this episode, Rob really just starts it. He just goes, "So Schofields, what's going on?" Michael is still upset about comments from Jonathan. Valid. Don't get called a slur. But the big thing Michael is doing now, his new asshole-ish behavior, is when he gets specifically called out on things that he's doing, he tries to find another example of someone doing the same thing and do this whole, like, well, why are you coming on me when they're doing the same thing? What about them? And it's the whole thing. It's like, well, they're not the focus right now. We're not talking about them. We're talking about you. Larry makes a real fun comment where he's like, listen, I don't like Michael. And they, like, cut to Michael making a face. He's like, but I don't mind their kids at all. They're talented and admirable and charming and fine. He thinks they're okay. Michelle has a talk here with Jonathan about being nice to others even when you don't like them. And then here is when Mark does officially apologize to Brittany, and he also apologizes sort of like through her by extension to Matt. He's like, I was looking for weak points. Do you know what the weak point in your family is? You. He apologizes, but also really tries to, like, explain, defend himself. One of those, like, listen, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, and Brittany catches up on this. She's like, yeah, that's not a real apology, but whatever. The rest of the challenges for this episode, this is the aforementioned weird chicken challenge. For the family face-off, they're given a trap, some papaya, and a rooster, and they're told, you have until sundown to trap a wild chicken. No one succeeds. The Hatmaker family gives up at like 2 p.m. The McRae family gives up at 5 p.m. And the Schofields at least make it to sundown, 6 p.m. But they still don't catch a chicken. So no one wins and no one gets anything. This was so bizarre. And also, but like still somewhat entertaining, I will say. And then for the next property quest, it's like an obstacle course where they have to carry a coconut filled with water and like pick up some other coconuts, and they have to like go over all these like little constructed things and then do this little trek through like a mangrove patch, and then dump like the water they've been carrying in a little basin, and whoever has the most water by the end is the winner. So we get a lot of like stressful things about like, oh, I tripped and I spilled some water. It like really comes down hard on some of the like family members. They're like, oh, I think I fucked it up for all of us. Well, they didn't swear. This is 2002. Again, guess who wins? Hatmaker family won. Schofields came in second, and the last place was the McRae family. But what this means, however, after the total ribbon counts after the previous property quest and the isolation challenge, is that the Schofield and the McRae family are tied for the last place. So they have to do another tiebreaker. So they go back to the house. We set up a tiebreaker. It's like there's a stick in the sand. You're going to stand so far away, and you're going to toss like a big 5 or 6 foot long reed at the stick, and whoever lands closest gets to stay. And then they end the episode. A weird choice. Don't know why they did that. They just ended it before they even finished it. I guess to have a cliffhanger to keep people coming back for the 7th episode, but it was kind of annoying and weird. The only thing I could think of is maybe there wasn't enough material for the final episode. So the editors were like, well, let's stick this in the front, and then we'll pad out another extra, 8 minutes of time with that. So, the final episode, episode 7, of course, the first thing we get to see is this tiebreaker. The McRae family and the Schofield family designates one person to do this little reed javelin throw. The McRae family picks Trent, the 15-year-old son, and they're all, supportive, and like, you can do it. And he's like, I can do it. The Schofield family picks Mike, the 41-year-old dad. Trent goes first, and he lands 16 feet away from the pole. Mike goes second and lands 5 feet away from the pole. And then we get a lot of Mike and Holly being like, yeah, we won that, but that feels horrible. We defeated a 15-year-old, And now he feels bad because he feels like he's the reason that their family is eliminated from the competition. Even though Larry and Janelle do a really good job, and they've done a great job the entire competition of managing their children's like expectations and how they react to losses and hurdles, where anytime there's a competition where it came down to one or two people performing well, the McRae family was really good to be like, no, you didn't lose it, we as a family lost it. You know, really redirecting that feeling of shame from the individual to the group, which, you know, is effective. Definitely makes them more like a cohesive group, I think. Before the send-off, Larry goes and tells Mark to just win the house. You know, they don't want the Schofields winning. For this last episode, I'm just going to kind of wrap it up real quickly because the challenge they do, the last two like challenges are short, and one's short, one's long, and not that entertaining, I'm not going to lie. Each family gets a night to spend alone in the house. The Hatmaker family and the Schofield family are top two. Randomly drawn. So for the first night, the Hatmaker's family get to spend the time in the house alone. The Schofields go camping. The next day, both of the families are taken to separate places. The Hatmakers go by seaplane to a deserted island. The Schofields are taken to a coral reef. They're given a treasure map. They find a chest. It has a local game that is kind of a version of checkers that they must learn. And everyone is correctly predicting that this game will come into play for the final challenge. They're also told to use the rest of the time before the final property quest, which is called a deed quest because it's the last one, to really get to know each other. So we could do the families doing a lot of like trivia with each other, like what's your favorite color? What's your favorite thing? Michelle foreshadows some stuff here, saying that the time to get to know each other, and she's like, well, they're going to use that in the final like challenge, our knowledge of each other as a family. She's like, this is going to be hard because while she knows her kids really, really well, the boys don't know Mark that well, and vice versa. And Mark knows her really well, and she knows Mark. But if it comes down to Mark being asked about the kids asked about Mark, that's where they're going to hit a snag and struggle. Final campfire with the families, little council thing with Rob. He asks them to roleplay as each other, and it does a bunch of roleplays, and asks them kind of questions about like, okay, answer this question as this person. Which, more foreshadowing, I've now realized was actually intended to give the families a little bit of like a sneak peek of the kind of thing they'll have to do in the final challenge, which we'll get to now. The final challenge is a giant version of the little checkers-esque game that they all practiced the day before, except this time, in order to move the pieces, which is literally their physical beings, like it's a giant version of the game played with the people, they have to answer a family trivia question correctly. Rob will ask them, and if they answer correctly, they can move one of their pieces. If they answer incorrectly, the other family can move one of the family who answered wrong to somewhere they want. And it is kind of like checkers, where if you like jump a piece, they are eliminated. Rob tells them once they get to the point where like all of the family's members are moved past the other family, so you couldn't do any more eliminations, that's when the game ends. And then whoever has the most family members still in the game is the winner. This goes on for like 15 or so minutes. It was like the show made it seem tense, but I will say at a certain point I get kind of like, okay. Where the tension came was like the questions that were being asked. Brittany got asked a question about like, what do you think Michael regrets the most here? And it's about like what it comes down to, like the correct answer is like not being open about his sexuality before marrying Holly, his wife, which is like a wild thing to ask a 15-year-old girl about her parents' marriage on a TV show. But she answers correctly. And this allows the Schofield family to remove Michelle from the game, which would have been the Hatmakers' strongest team player. And that is the downfall. So, wrap it up real fast. Schofield family wins this challenge. They win the entire show. Somehow, of course they did. The villains that no one could stand won the show and won the house. And like I mentioned earlier, technically a game show does not have to award prizes to contestants if the show never airs, even if it gets canceled halfway through. But allegedly, according to people from UPN, All the prizes were awarded, and the house did get awarded to the Schofields. And I will mention, for second place, the Hatmaker family actually was given all of the prizes they passed on for winning all of their family face-off challenges. So I'm assuming they purchased all those prizes anyway, and they were like, well, now we should give them to someone. And conveniently, the Hatmaker family won all the face-off challenges anyway, so let's just give them all to them. So that's Under One Roof. It's a very interesting show to watch. I'd never heard of it. I don't think anyone's really ever heard of this show, especially since it got canceled twice in 2002, and nothing aired past the third episode. Very, very cool that Endemol has cataloged this on their YouTube channel and allowed it to not currently become lost media, and we can still access it and watch it. Some of the things that I really find interesting that I've kind of mentioned throughout this, of course, I've mentioned this a few times, the show, the concept of a vacation home and a family having enough wealth and enough capital to be able to have a physical home in a different location that they don't even live at most of the year. They only spend luxury time there, and they have enough wealth accumulated to also be able to travel there when they want to. It's such an interesting concept, especially in our current economic situation. But also, having it in a tropical location, it feels exploitative, but at the same time, the show, I think, tried to make an effort to be respectful to the local population. That they had the contestants do things with the locals. We got to see the scene of them going to church with them. That's just, the locals are the ones delivering the challenge instructions to the families each day. I do wonder if that means that UPN or Endemol as a production company hired the locals and paid them to be part of the show. I'd be very curious to somehow find an answer to that. I don't know if I ever will, unless I can talk to Endemol directly. Or someone from Fiji. Reach out to me. The other thing that, when I was researching the show and I was trying to find information about how was it produced, what was the history, what happened, is there anything else I can find out? One of the ways that I can do that, especially on shows like this, is I can research by searching for the names of the people who were on the show. Not many shows use pseudonyms. Most people are, interestingly, they use their real name. And in here I also was given information about what job they used to work or were working at the time of the show and where they were from. So I was able to find an Orlando Times, or I think it's Orlando Sentinel, article about the McRae family's participation in the show, which is actually where I found out some quotes from the producers. A very interesting one in particular that the producers told in that article that they never actually intervened in any of the conflicts in the show. They never felt like they had to. Everything kind of worked out. But also I'm kind of glad they didn't, because it did make for good TV. They did know what they were doing. America just didn't like this show in 2002. I don't know if they'd like it today. I think Michael would be canceled in the public square, and so would Daniel, and probably Jonathan too, and maybe Mark. Who knows? For fans of reality TV who like a little bit of a messy drama, some fighting, it is kind of entertaining there. But while I was researching, and I'm looking into these families, and I'm wow, I really can't find things about some of these families, even though they have very distinctive last names. I had a kind of a moment of realization and a pause where I'm wait, what am I doing? Why am I trying to dig into these people's lives? and what I was looking for specifically was to try to find again newspaper or online articles where they had done an interview. But what I was only finding instead was Facebook profiles, social media profiles. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I did find threads online talking about how Michael Scofield, the Scofields got divorced. Michael eventually passed away. Holly's still around. But then I think I also found that Brittany passed away at a young age, because I just found a bunch of memorial service stuff for her. And then in contrast, the Pagani family seems to be doing well. They're just hanging out and chilling. I think they have grandkids now. So yeah. But it's what am I doing? But then that made me think a lot more about I again always ask on this show, what does being on this reality show do for the families, the people who participated? In this case, these families and these individuals. The Schofields won a house, and the Hatmaker families won a bunch of prizes. But the Schofields also, like, earned a shitty reputation for their behavior and the way they played the game and the way they participated on the show. And it's such a strange thing to think about, like, going on the show, doing this, and then just going back to your life. And that's it. And the weird thing to me is, like, back then, you know, when reality TV was still kind of, like, blowing up, and the genre was expanding and exploring itself and mutating rapidly into all these different forms, some of which wouldn't be fully realized until a decade later, you know, they didn't really have any, like, expectations for this. So no one really went on this show, it seems, from, like, watching them. What we can see from actually watching their behavior on the edited program, none of them really had, like, a sense of, like, what would happen because they were on the show socially, which is interesting to, like, watch. And, you know, and it kind of does explain a lot of Michael's behavior, and how he's so, like, flippant about being this, like, being strategic, as he'll say it, but just kind of being an asshole and also weird and annoying to everyone else. Interesting, you know, things to think about. All of this about a show that never even aired over half of its episodes. Thank you for listening. If you stuck it out this far, I really appreciate listening to almost an hour and a half long episode about this show, again, that barely anyone's heard of. If this piqued your interest or it sounded interesting, I definitely encourage you to go watch it. I'll put a link to Endemol's YouTube channel in the description of the show notes, or whatever you call it, for this episode. It's 7 episodes, so like 40-ish minutes each. You could watch it in an afternoon. You could watch it over a weekend. See if you would be content with the show stopping after 2 or 3 episodes. Or see how long you can last watching it. Because there were definitely times where people were talking and I'm like, I am so done with this. Even though I ended up enjoying it ultimately by the end. But I also enjoy reality TV. I have a whole podcast about it. Thank you for listening, as always. You can interact with me on social media. You can follow me on Instagram at The Recap Episode. You can subscribe on YouTube at The Recap Episode Pod, where all these episodes are uploaded as YouTube videos, but also some future bonus content will make its way there eventually. Please like, rate, comment on all your favorite podcast platforms. Share the show with your friends. Post it to your own socials. Communicate with me. Talk with me about it. Give me some comments. What do you think? You can catch me in the next episode. Until then, I'm going to claim to teach families how to walk on fire, walk on coals, and then just teach them a life lesson and have them break arrows with their necks instead. Bye!